Hi, everyone. Good evening, and welcome to another special episode of Real Chill Conversations. The Saturday episodes are a little more specified in terms of news and really kind of breaking down some topics. Sometimes it's going to be all of the ladies of Real Chill Conversations, other times it's just going to be a few of us. This evening, you have myself, Brenna, you have Edwina. You have Dominique. And then
Hello.
we have our special guest of the evening. We have Real Talk podcast host and police officer, Mr. Antoine Brown, who, thanks to Edwina and Dominique kind of putting in their work, we have the pleasure of you joining us this evening. So I'm going to let you go ahead and get started, sir, and tell us a little bit about yourself. But I do want to mention you and Edwina have a little familial connection. Is that right?
That is right.
All right, you don't have to say
Correct.
any
That's right.
more. You don't have to say any more.
Yes.
You now have the floor, sir.
I have the floor. Well, since you started that way, we'll go right into it. Yeah, my name is Antoine Thomas, and I am the host of the Real Talk podcast. It's a podcast show that's centered around police. We talk about police matters. I talk about hitting the hard and the good issues of policing, right? Good and bad. So tune into that. You can catch it on all your major podcast outlets. But we'll move on from that little plug. But yeah, Edwina and I, we happen to be first cousins, and we share the same birthday. So we have a
Yes,
special bond in common. I'm
we
older than she
do.
is, but it's okay.
He is.
I love her. Yep. So our mothers are sisters. So they're really close too. So
Yes, they are. They
my
are
mom's the
super
oldest,
close.
and my mom's the oldest, but my
Yes,
mom she gets a lot of wisdom from Edwina's mom.
yes.
She feels
They
like she's the
balance
oldest.
each other's out. They balance each other out. Yes.
Oh yeah.
Now, Antoine, 12 years you've been in the law enforcement business. I'll call it business.
Yeah.
You've been a police officer for 12 years. During our brief conversation beforehand, I know you mentioned that you've been passionate about it since you were a child. But what actually made you pull the plug and just go ahead and get started and go through the process so that you can become an actual police officer and have been doing so for the past 12 years? That's a long time.
It's a long time. It's been fun. I know we didn't share this briefly on behind the stage, but my background was culinary arts. I was a chef for 6.5 years, but I wasn't old enough yet to become a cop. You have to be 21 here in North Carolina, which is where I'm at. And so at 20, I started researching the law enforcement, how to get in, and I went ahead and found out I needed to have a good speeding record, which I did not have at the time. And so, yeah, I didn't know that, right? I thought you can just speed, but no, I had some points in my life that I had to get off. But when I got into law enforcement, I started at 21. I was in the Raleigh Police Academy, which is the capital city here in Raleigh, in North Carolina, excuse me. But anyways, make a long story short, I knew that was a calling for me because, again, my uncle is a police officer, and I consider myself, no matter where I'm speaking at a podcast, wherever it is, I tell people I'm a second generation cop. So my mom's brother, Edwina's mom's brother, their oldest brother, or is the second oldest? We'll say oldest. He might be the second oldest. Anyways, he's a retired cop out of Plantation, Florida. He spent over 30 years in the profession. So, but it's a calling. I talk about that on my show as well. Policing is a calling, and I know that the Lord's called me to be in this profession. So that's another reason why I'm in it. That's the main reason why I'm in it.
Well, it definitely makes sense that that's something that you've chosen to do, especially since you've been passionate about it.
Mm-hmm.
One of the things that I'm noticing, and especially since you and Edwina are family, is that there is a connection of service and community within y'all's bloodline. So it's excellent that you have pursued your passion and you're doing what you're doing. You've got your podcast. Edwina is doing what she's doing. She
Oh yeah,
joins us. She also has her positive affirmations podcast. So congratulations to her on that. But
congratulations.
I gotta ask you, sir, Republican, Black Republicans, and I'm seeing these Trump hats in the background. Talk to us about that.
Well, you know what? I'll start off by saying this. I think every Trump supporter, it was like wintertime. You know, you pack up for a new season, you put everything away. we put it away, but I kept those there behind me. They've been there, and I haven't worn them, but I put them back out. I'm wearing my hats again. My hats are back on display, so whenever I'm at, I'm pulling it out, and we're having conversations again. Matter of fact, be on the lookout. You'll see more Trump hats coming out again. We have to preach it. So yeah, Black Republican. That is what I am, and I love every minute of it. You know, some people say that they're not a Republican. They may say they're independent, but I'm actually what we call a staunch Republican. I'm all the way in. I'm full blooded at this point.
Now that you're
Go ahead.
speaking about Trump, I want to know, like, what made you become his supporter?
So, I always tell people this. So I have a lineup. Here you go, Dominique. I wasn't really a big fan of Apprentice, but I know he was famous from that. But I didn't really know much about President Trump, or I should say Donald Trump at the time, other than that he was a millionaire mogul, real estate mogul. But when he came on the scene, so backing up, I actually voted for President Bush. That's when I was eligible to vote for the first election. Of course, that's when 9/11 took place. And I believe in when someone starts something, you should finish. And I know that he was in a bit of a mess, and I didn't feel like it was appropriate for someone else to come in and try to clean up what was going on with the, 9/11. I call it massacre. Anyway, so then, of course, after that, Obama came in. I didn't know much about politics, but I voted him in office twice. I gave him a vote. Trump came on. I said, I need to really take a look at this. And so start listening to him and realizing what he was saying was true. And everything people, especially our people, were saying about him, it appeared to me it was the opposite, that he was racist. He was a womanizer, all this stuff. I got to looking into it myself. And I said, I like this guy. And from there, it just took off.
So I've got to ask you then, if you voted twice for Obama and you are a devout Republican, what made you vote for Obama? Were you supporting Black people as a whole, or were you supporting what he actually stood for and what his platform was when he was running for president and then wound up winning office that first time and then again getting reelected?
Well, that's a good question because I always, and I'm honest about it. I'm sure y'all have talked to many people, and y'all may be the same way. You heard people say, "Did you vote for him because he was Black?" Well, a partial of my vote, a very small percentage, did go to because he was a Black man, and I believe in America we all have the opportunity to advance and move up in the world, right? Just a home of the brave and land of the free, right? So even though we found out later on that he wasn't 100% Black, it's just the fact of the matter we saw a brown person in the White House, and he was running the White House. He's not like what we have now. He was actually running it. And so I thought it was pretty neat to see that because it was historic. And of course, every Black mom and dad wants their kids to become the president if that's what they choose. They always tell them you can be the next president. So that was history making. So partial of that did go to that he was a Black man, but I will say this: Barack Obama was very intelligent. He spoke well, so he had the appearance, and all that played a part into it as well.
Excellent.
And again, at that time, I wasn't that abreast in the politics, so I didn't really know what he was going to do and what he wasn't going to do. I didn't know. I just like, yeah, he seems cool. Let's vote for him. But looking back on it,
Antoine,
yeah,
why do you feel like most African American people vote Democrat instead of Republican?
that's a great question, cuz, right? As we say, cuz,
Yeah.
because the biggest thing is I always talk about this. I think in the Black community as a whole, and I've noticed this in the white community as well, but as a whole, as a Black community, we don't really talk politics around the table. Most of us are born Christian or raised Christian, and it's pretty much written that a Christian won't, believe in abortion. A Christian won't do a lot of things that we see that the Democrats are pushing now, right? And of course, abortion is the biggest one. But anyways, we never talk about this stuff. We just go to church, come home, hang out with your family, go back to church. Politics is never at the table because parents are working, they're not keeping up with the latest, and they've been hoodwinked. And their parents has voted Democrats. So we just continue to carry that cycle, and that's something we really don't dive into. We think it's an everyday deal. So we don't really focus on it much.
So the politics, getting involved in politics, you said it's been about 11 years now.
Yeah.
So police officer for 12, and now we've got politics on top of that for about 11. What also made you say, let me go ahead, let me get myself put in position to get involved. And you've built up a platform. You're a police officer, so you're generating respect for that, especially in North Carolina. Now listen, I spent many a summer in Wilson, North Carolina. That's where my
Wilson.
grandparents. Wilson,
Mhm.
Wilson, North
Parker's,
Carolina. Parker's
Parker's
Barbecue.
barbecue.
There you go. There you go. So
See?
I get it.
Yeah.
I understand, and I think that it's commendable, because not only are you putting yourself out there by being a police officer, you're a police officer in a very southern and a very rigid state when it comes to being open about change and different things. So what made you say, let me go ahead and put myself in politics as well?
Yeah, the PBA, Police Benevolence Association. So here in North Carolina, we can't physically have unions, but if you go to the website, you'll see that it's the voice for law enforcement. We can advocate, and we can be a grassroots organization where we boots on the ground, and we go to legislation meetings, we go to committees, and we also bring them to us, and we sit down. We usually rent a hotel room out, conference room, bring these politicians in the room, former or current politicians. Maybe they're running for local office, state office. Anyways, we bring them and we screen them. We drill them. We close them in the locked door, like literally put them in the door, and we drill law enforcement questions at them. And I got a chance to be around people that were senators, running for Senate, and listen to all these people talk. And a couple of times they were former law enforcement officers, but listening to them talk, and I realized sometimes what they were telling us, you could read right through it, know that they're not giving you the real answer, giving you the politician answer. And the more and more I started rubbing shoulders with these politicians, I realized that I needed to get involved too, to make a change. If they could do it, I can do it. But let's see, can we make a real change and actually hold our promises? What we practice, what we preach, as we say. So, and more of us need to get involved if we want to help push the change along.
That's true. That's true. I
Yeah.
know last year, um, it seemed like law enforcement, and I'm going to say the Black Lives Matter, was so divided with everything that was going on with the pandemic. And you see police officers, shootings, all of
Hmm.
that. How can we come together as a community to show that, law enforcement is not the enemy, that they're here to help us, to protect us, to serve? Um, like you said, our background, we have law enforcement in our background.
Hmm.
I stand by the blue. I respect the blue. But how can we get out there um, in the community to show that, all law enforcement, they're not bad?
Right. Well, that's a good question too. All of y'all questions are great, by the way. I enjoy answering. When you look at it, it just takes. I always say it starts with a conversation, and I'm in the gas station a lot, just kind of like how Uncle Willie used to do it right back in the day, just hanging out and talking to people. I have met so many people standing there, and they realizing that I'm just another human wearing a uniform, and they figure out I'm a humorous guy. They're like, "Wow, he's approachable." And I'm getting to know a lot of people, just the regulars that come in there, and I don't, make myself boisterous or making myself some big guy. Just stay in the background, and at the end of the day, people come up and just start off by speaking, and that changed the whole dynamics. And they realize, okay, he's open, and that starts the conversation. I may be able to change one person who doesn't even like cops, and I get looks sometimes, and what I'm noticing, some of those looks are because they don't know how to interact, and so sometimes I have to open that ice up. But the way to do it is just getting out and just talking, have a conversation. I talked about it on the podcast I was on a couple of weeks ago. Steve Noble, I joked around with him. He asked that same question. I said, continue to buy us breakfast and lunch, and that will help us. But I told him I was joking, right? But I said it again, so I must be serious. But no, if you do that, just a conversation, and
Yeah,
just be yourself, and just obey the
yeah,
law. Number one, though, now you have to give and take, and I always say that respect on both sides.
exactly. I agree.
Obey the law, respect the law. Then my next question is going to be for you, Antoine. Have you ever been in a situation where you've been able to de-escalate something that has gotten very heightened? Because between Black Lives Matter and Blue Lives Matter, all lives matter. Like, how do you respond to somebody that combats Blue Lives Matter with all lives matter, Black Lives Matter, and all of that? I mean, what do you say to someone? Let's say that there's an argument that's going on in a store, in a retail establishment, the grocery store, or whatever, and you're dispatched to that call, and two people are going back and forth and they're arguing over who life matters more or whatever. How do you overcome that? How do you respond to that?
Let me tell you that y'all are just firing off some great questions, by the way. Y'all keep doing what you're doing. I throw it out there. At the end of the day, you're right. De-escalations is one of the biggest things in law enforcement. And if you don't have what we call the gift of gab, right, being able to talk to people, you won't. You'll find yourself reaching for pepper spray, all the weapons you have on your belt, all the way up to the gun, because your mouth is. We know this is the most powerful thing you have, and if you use that properly, you can de-escalate. But to answer your question about all these hashtags and tags, we should just get rid of all of them. And I know we say the same thing, all Blue Lives Matter, but we only did that because we want to counteract what the BLM was saying, Black Lives Matter. End of the day, we know this, all lives matter. God created us, so we all matter. And so if we could stop the labeling, because, you got to understand this, when you're labeling the groups, Black people, whatever, you're still separating us, and then that's what the country is trying to do. They're dividing us more and more. I think it's more racial than it was back in the Bull O'Connor days, if you really look at it, because now everybody has their own little label, Black Lives Matter. And actually, it offends white people too. So what would happen, and flip it around, they say White Lives Matter. It's going to be a lot of offended Black people, but we know all lives matter. So why we have to put a special emphasis on that? We know that Black Lives Matter, and we should make it matter,
And Mr. Thomas, I'm glad that you expressed how you felt about that. I thought that's very important for everyone to hear. I read about your post. I'm really big on helping people, and I think like we're left bamboozled now, like Brenna says. But
Exactly.
I read your post about the stimulus checks. However, I have always felt like they played us, like when it came to the election part. Like they were like, oh, I'm going to give you this amount of money. No, I'm going to give you this amount of money. And then I feel like now, where are the stimulus checks? I feel like now a lot of people is in desperation for help. Can you tell me what you think about stimulus checks now and how all that played out?
Well, when you look at the stimulus check, that obviously happened under the administration of President Trump, right?
Mm-hmm.
That was during the height of COVID, and we saw a lot of people. I haven't received my last one, but it's kind of ironic now that Biden's come in. But my last two from President
Oh,
Trump, I received those. But anyways, make a long story short, those were to help stimulate the economy, right? And for people who didn't necessarily have income coming in. And at the end of the day, those were only to, again, stimulate. It wasn't to allow us to continue to live off. That was just a helping hand. And I think we're getting kind of confused. There's people waiting for their fourth and sixth and fifth, whatever, stimulus check. But those are only used to get the economy rolling again, and then to put some money back into the American hands. And I know some people say, well, it should have been a whole lot more. At the end of the day, that was our money. If you invested into the working system, that was technically your money. It wasn't the government's money. But I
okay.
feel that it was much needed at the time. I think what the government tried to do, they tried to help out in some way, right? And that was the only way they knew. I think mathematically that it could be possibly done without going into debt, which we already are in debt. But that was
Yeah.
only to, again, designed to help. And even with the other money that has come in for the parents, that is for the parents who need to do child care and things like that, and help them continue to move forward to get them to the next point.
Okay.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
So, Antoine, for the last 2 weeks on our podcast, we have been talking about the pandemic, Afghanistan, and the Taliban. Um, everybody in the world have seen how Biden, decided to take the troops out and leave the American people before he had a plan in place. What is your intake on that? I know a lot of people was hurt because it's like, why would you sit there and let the troops come out and leave American people without having a plan? It's like or did he not care? And even still, I was watching the news last week when they flew in the soldiers that passed away. He's looking at his watch. So it's like,
Right.
does he care about the American people? What is his plan? He's not speaking up. Are we on our own? Is he just letting Taliban into the United States? What is our allies thinking of us? So, what
Hmm.
is your intake on just everything that has happened in the last couple of weeks with Biden making this big decision and just, I guess, I would say, putting it on the American people?
Well, that's a great question too. Maybe some people don't know your mom served honorably, retired from the military, and her heart
Yes,
still
what I
bleeds.
think, yes, exactly.
Yeah,
Yeah, she bleeds the
she
military.
bleeds the
Man, she was
military.
hot when she heard what
Very
happened, what
upset.
Biden did. Very upset, very upset. But yes,
Exactly,
I'll
and
let you
and you
continue.
are a military child too. So you traveled in Germany and you've been all over the place, Korea. And at the end of the day, to say the least, I know that what we saw, and it's unfortunate that we know how the Taliban, Al Qaeda, ISIS, those are killers. Well, let's call them serial killers. That's what they are. They kill. So all the stuff you're hearing about Biden saying that they're going to be able to go back in there and rescue these people, they're not going to be able to do it. The deal was already made. Taliban is already having mock funerals over there with American flags. They're going to kill every American that they can. And I think what he blames it on Trump. And the deal was with that, Trump had a meeting with the Taliban, obviously, right? And they made a deal. That deal was to end the 20 years of being over there and over in Afghanistan, right? We went over there obviously because of 9/11. To dwindle it all down, at the end of the day, even President Trump was not going to, I don't think anybody would ever do what he did, but President Trump was not going to release all the military at once and leave everybody stranded. And when you do stuff like that, it causes chaos, right? Everybody panics at one time, which is what we saw. Everybody tried to get to the Kabul airport, which was impossible. And of course, we found out the Taliban was holding the strongholds in all the areas, right, surrounding the checkpoints, and they couldn't get in or out, and which is still happening now. So I think we had to leave at some point, but as your mom stated, I know my mom and your mother talked, but my mom carried on to me that at the end of the day, the way that works over there is that they still going to leave some troops, right? You can't pull everybody out because it's not safe yet. And even though they said we're turning it back over into the hands of Afghan military, they're not even strong enough to handle. As we saw, Taliban took over in what 1 or 2 days, less than 2 days. They took over that whole country that we had sieged for 20 years.
And all the
Exactly.
equipment was left there in the hands
Exactly.
of the Taliban.
About
Exactly,
90
Dominique. So
billion,
what are they going to do with the equipment
absolutely.
now that is left over
They're,
there? So,
That's
they're using
scary
it.
on its own.
mhm.
Well, think about how much money we lost there. We spent we left $90 billion of equipment there. That's
Wow.
I think about what we could have done with that money. And don't forget, now stimulus checks that they had going out, the Democrats actually was giving money to the Afghanis and other Muslim countries to help free the women who have been enslaved, and of course their voice is not wanted. But look at what's happening now. We left them over there anyways, and they're the main ones getting killed. I listened to a podcast show recently where a lady was crying out for help, saying, "Please help us, President Biden. They're about to be murdered, the whole family." Um, because remember, we were trying to help them get their voice, and we helped them. Now the Taliban's back. They're like, this is what y'all wanted to do, okay?
Yes,
And so they're
yes.
going back to the
Yeah,
slaughtering. Sad day.
most
I,
definitely.
reading the news and watching the stories, one of the visual stories and news stories that I got to watch and also read, they were trying to assist a pregnant woman. I believe she had been shot 7 or 8 times. She wound up delivering the child. I'm not sure of the condition of the woman, but I believe she's still in grave condition. But then
Yes.
talking about burning passports and things like that, for me, it brought me back to when I was at work and I was sitting at my desk and we first heard about what was going on with 9/11 when the first building was hit and then planes
Mhm.
went down. Do you think that's putting us into a little bit of a PTSD cycle where we have such negative memories about how that was happened and how 9/11 and the feelings of could we have prevented this? Could we have done a better job of negotiation? And did that negotiation break down and then cause the after effects that we're still talking about and we're remembering every September 11th?
Absolutely. I think all the families and people that were um, harmed, which I don't think many survived, being in the Twin Towers at the time of the planes going through. But the people that did survive, that was on the ground, right, walking through, going to work, yeah, they're definitely going to have PTSD. But think about the military who fought over there and all their friends that died over there to make sure that we paid revenge back to the Taliban and all those forces that was helping them, the Saudi Arabians, to go ahead and attack our country. So now we're reliving it, and who knows what's going to happen now? They could be. Listen, remember they're flying all these Afghans in. We could have a few mixed in who are right here waiting to, hey,
Exactly.
we have to be on our guard.
That was my
I
next
don't even want
question
to.
to you, Antoine. I was going to ask you, do you think, in the midst of everything that has happened, if some Afghanistans have came over here that's not, wanting to harm us? Because Biden left it wide open where just anybody's coming through, no checkpoint, nothing. It's like, you're coming over there, coming over here, what's going to happen next? And we're not even forgetting about the pandemic. Like,
I know.
nobody's checking to see if they don't have COVID. You're just letting them come right over here. So
They're not
What was
that's
that?
being
another thing.
vetted. Hmm.
What was
Hmm?
that, Dominic?
They're not being vetted.
They're
Yeah,
not being vetted.
exactly. Exactly. They're
It's
not being
been
vetted.
it's impossible at this point to vet them on, like you said, the COVID testing and definitely terrorist testing. But think about it this way: the Taliban are smart men. You have to be smart to have a plan in place to take over a country in a matter of a day. Yeah, those guys are strategic on what they wanted to do. They understood that Biden was coming. But listen, when they found out Biden was becoming the president, they already had really start working their plan. Now, President Trump, if you go back and listen, he put them on notice. Some people may say it was harsh, but he told them, and I believe he may have said a cuss word or two, but he says, "We're going to keep this deal, and if any not one American, I'll put it this way. He probably said not one strand of hair should be touched when we leave that country. But if you do, we're coming for you." And he meant it, and we were going to do it. Now, unfortunately, you know what Biden wants us to do? He's going to allow us to, well, the media's going to help him. They want us to forget about what just took place. And we'll forget about it. Give us about a couple of years. We'll forget that even happened. And that's the whole strategy. And then he'll be asking for the black vote again if he makes it through the first term of the election.
I don't think he is. Just personal opinion. I don't think Biden is. I think he tried to get most of the African American people to vote for him, which he did. But now I think a lot of us are opening our eyes to a lot of things that he is doing, and the things he said he was going to commit to us, and he has not. So I don't think he is.
He has not, and I know a lot of people who are of white descent, Hispanic. They also voted for Biden because they got tired of hearing President Trump's mouth allegedly. That's what I hear from everybody. But at the end of the day, yeah, you were hoodwinked, as we say, bamboozled, and run amok by Joe Biden himself.
He's been in the establishment forever. Vice president, senator, and it's like I wasn't for him. I wasn't, but I'm like, y'all already know what he is capable of doing. Like nothing really.
Yeah.
So
You're right. Can I add this? A lot of my Republican friends, we talk, right? And some people say, well, why did some Republicans turn on Trump? Y'all saw that when it was time for when he wanted vice president to go ahead and overturn the election votes, which he had the power to do, but he felt like morally wasn't right. But the reason why some of the Republicans like Mitch McConnell, of course, Mitt Romney was already a rhino, but some of the others, even Susan Collins, she's one of them. You know why they did that? Because President Trump, who's only served one term, who's never been a career politician, came in and made so many changes within 3.5 years of his election of his term. Than people like Mitch McConnell, even Joe Biden himself has spent 30 years in the profession and hadn't got anything accomplished. And the thing about it is President Trump had a massive plan ready for us if we would have got the next 4 years. And actually, you know how they say the president can't focus on one race? Well, he actually had a plan in place for minorities, special emphasis on black people. It was called the Platinum Plan. And so research that and see what he had on the books with the help of Ben Carson, what was going to do to the black community. It was going to bring a lot of black entrepreneurs up with federal funding to help launch businesses. But the key was you had to open it up in the black communities that was suffering.
I've heard many people say that too. Like they felt like Trump, it was their opportunity to, they never had more opportunity, in this world, in America, to actually be able to become an entrepreneur
Yeah.
or be able to make money until Trump came in.
Yeah.
So they said that's true. That's how they feel.
Reagan
That
and,
is true.
and Bush were not offering those same opportunities
They were not
at,
offering. They were
at
making
all.
deals. They were making deals, but it was not with the American people. And unfortunately, we had that in the White House. And I know this is a sort of a bashing deal, but it's the truth. People got to hear it. Unfortunately, as we see, Joe Biden's been making deals with everybody but us, China, Middle East, and a lot of his Democrat friends. And some Republicans voted too, so we're not saying they're perfect because they're not. There's a lot of Republicans that need to get out of office as well. Listen, this is what I tell people, and I'm making a ratio. I say all the old white people or old white, black people too, they need to get out of office and let the young generation come in and show them how we need to run this country. Okay, the ones who are not what we call woke and the ones that's not asking for handouts. I'm talking about people like you and I and everybody on this podcast here.
Mr. Thomas, do you feel like conservatives are banned from social media? Like it's really hard for them to speak their mind?
100%. Which is why Mike Lindell started his own platform, the My Pillow. Y'all know the My Pillow man, Mike Lindell. He started on his own platform, Frank Speech, and there's a young man right now who actually created a cell phone, and it is on his own VPN, and it cannot be hacked or traced by these big tech companies. He started it from scratch, and you'll see that. I forgot the name of the phone. It's called It's called something Republican phone or something. I forget the name of it, but it's coming on the airways pretty soon, so be on the lookout for that. But we have been censored more than anybody else for sure, and partially that is because we have the facts, and they don't want the facts and the truth to come out.
Do you have suggestions for us as Black men, Black women, in 2021, where we are and what we've gone through, the George Floyd situation, Breonna Taylor situation, and just so many unnecessary situations and unfortunate situations that have taken place, and it's been the death and or some people keep calling it murder of various Black people. And how do we do our part in a community, in the community, and as a whole? Do we utilize our platforms with our podcasts? Are we out in the streets protesting, or are we doing more community service based actions? And is that a sit down and a conversation and allowing people to voice their opinions and say what it is that they need to say, that's not being listened to because the commissioner can't talk to them right now, or their local senator can't talk, or congressperson can't talk? What can we do to help bridge the gap and get people to be in a place of better understanding? Even if we have differences of opinion, even if you're Republican and I'm Democrat and you're independent, but we all Black
Right.
at the end of the day. We all
Mm-hmm.
came over here on a ship years and years ago,
Mm-hmm.
and a lot of us feel that we still haven't earned our reparations. A lot of us feel like we've made so much progress, and then there's others that feel like we really haven't made much progress at all. I mean, it's not been that long since there was segregation on schools, going to schools, and on buses, and in restrooms, and even performers being able to go to nightclubs and sing, and all of that. Are we really making progress? And if we're not, what do we need to be doing? How do we move forward?
Well, you said something very important. Reparations. We got our reparations by coming to America. That's the reparations. And end of the day, everybody has the same opportunity, from LeBron James all the way to Dominique, Brianna, Edwina, and Antoine. We have the same opportunities, whether we use those opportunities, right? We're not all gifted to play basketball. Some sing, some go into ministry, some are actors, whatever it may be. But reparations, I don't believe in, because that would be impossible. Because number one, the people that are living on this earth to this day had nothing to do with the slave trade in the slave days. None of us did. So reparations is impossible to give out, no matter how much you calculate it and say this is how much this person. It wouldn't even be feasible. But when you look at making a change, there's something going on which y'all heard of it. I'm sure the critical race theory has hit the airways. I can tell you here in North Carolina, in my local chapter, GOP, Republican Party, we actually have been going to. I haven't, so let me not take the credit, but they've been going to school board meetings. And one thing about, I'm gonna be honest, one thing about the white community, they will get up close and personal, not afraid to go out. They're not going to necessarily riot now, but we did see them in the midst of BLM. That's a whole nother topic. But the real true people, they're out there protesting with their voices, and they're going to these school board meetings, and they're mad and they're fired up about the mask mandate, all this stuff. But it starts with getting in front of these people, because at the end of the day, we pay them, the school board, to make decisions on behalf of the students, right, and teachers. So you got to get out there and talk. It goes that way too with the city council. Go to these meetings. If you want to voice something, you're not, because one thing again the white people do, they go to their city council meetings and they'll let them know, from all the way down to a water sewage problem to building thousands of homes on the same road that they lived on. They'll go and voice it, and it starts there. And the more you talk about it, and you got to bring facts. So that's the thing. You got to bring facts, and those things are overturned more than not if you look at it. But you got to go there. Protesting is great. Violent protesting is wrong. But you can go and march on the streets and hold your fist up, whatever it may be, and yell. But when you start tearing down people's property that doesn't belong to you, that's a crime, number one. That's called damage to property. But you also are breaking up the communities. And we found out that the people that were doing this in the Antifa movement, they don't even live. They're paid actors, as they call them. And that's true. They're paid, funded by George Soros and many other Democrat people. And to go tear stuff up, that's their job, to tear it up. Because who carries book bags at protests? You know what you got in there? Bottled water, chips, and Nabisco crackers. Nope, they're carrying weapons, bricks. They're carrying flames, and they're carrying things
Wow.
that help explode. And as you saw, think about it. How did they get the fire started? It wasn't started with a big lighter. They had to have some type of explosives and heavy, chemicals to get these fires to start. They took down high-rise buildings. You probably saw it at the highlight of the protest. I remember watching that. So.
I know here in Atlanta, there was a lot of craziness going on in the looting and
Yes.
throwing bricks through stores and robbing and all this kind of stuff, and the fires. And it was also shown and documented that it wasn't the Black people that were, causing the violence. It was white kids running through neighborhoods and trying to hit up Saks Fifth Avenue and then blaming it on
I
Black
saw
Lives
that.
Matters. Yeah.
Yes.
True. That was all to confuse everybody. But at the end of the day, think about it. I said I told some of my white colleagues, you can't push and promote my life being more important than I'm going to promote and push it. It don't even make sense. How could a white person stand up there and protest, say Black Lives Matter? Of course we know that. But if you don't think your lives matter, the white person telling you it's not going to be much better. So they were there. Most of them was there for guilt trip, and they didn't want to get assaulted. And they didn't want their houses getting burned down or looted. So they joined the, which was smart, right? They joined the madness. And they said, well, you want to tear some stuff up? Let's go tear it up together. But also they knew that listen, we weren't that smart to figure it out, that if they could help cause chaos, we would think and look at him and say, oh, you're throwing bricks too? Oh, I got a white person helping me. And so that wasn't for solidarity. They didn't march for solidarity. If you think about it, and you look at who was doing it, it was young white college students who was already indoctrinated along with the Black students from college. So they wasn't thinking about that. They were just coming to tear some stuff up, and they got paid as well. They got paid. So there you go.
Wow. It's great to hear your experience on that. Definitely. I also want to touch on something, because we were talking about this last Saturday. We were touching on the vaccine with Edwina and Brenna, and we actually had a viewer. They came on the live and was like, Christians do not take the vaccine because they are cell lines of aborted children back in in the 1970s and 80s. Edwina, tell us more about it.
Yeah, she made a comment about how Christians, they don't want to take the vaccination because they're putting, I guess, aborted babies, their cells in the vaccination. So, of course, I heard a little bit about it. And Dominique did some research about it this week too, but we wanted your intake on it. Like, what do you think? Like, is the vaccination, okay to take? Are there really cells in it? Like, what is your input, your intake on it when it comes to getting vaccinated? Because I know right now they're keep pushing it, pushing it, pushing it, but why they keep pushing it, if there's cells in it from an aborted baby, that doesn't make sense.
Right. Well, being a first responder, of course, they went when it was time. They offered it to us, and I declined on my vaccination shot. I actually had COVID. I lost my taste and smell, which was good. I lost some weight, so I was asking. I was trying to figure out, God, how could I do that again, but not have COVID? Because I like to eat, right? So, but I lost weight, believe it or not. But there's nothing to play with. We know people have died from it, but I think it is a definitely. Of course, the government is overreaching because they're telling us to wear masks. That's the beginning of it. Everybody locked down. But what that was part of the reset, they called it. But at the most, when you look at the government getting involved, it was to see how many people were going to cowardly go into submission and run into their house and cover up and hide the kids, as they say, hide the wife, whatever, hide everybody. They got into that moment. Nobody wanted to come out. There was times when the streets was pretty much deserted. Then they tried to put us on lockdown, mandated lockdowns. Think about it. The only time you lock something down is when there's violence or chaos, right? Not because there was COVID in the wind, of course, in the air. I was actually moving around. I told a lot of my friends if I got an urge for a milkshake, I was going to go out there, and the police try to stop me and arrest me. We're going to say, well, first of all, nicely, professionally, that's outside of your scope. I'm not living in China. I'm allowed to move about the country freely as long as I'm not violating any laws, right? And there was no lockdowns because there was protests. Those first few days they did do that, curfews, but to lock the whole state down for masks and COVID was that's crazy. I mean, people have to get out and work, shop, eat, whatever it may be. Of course, they said sunlight helps reduce the spread and helps you get stronger, right? And then they told us stay in the house. So it was all mixed communications. Wear the mask, don't wear the mask, double mask, triple mask. So it was a lot of misinformation, and they wanted to see, which they were able to do successfully, how many people were going to abide. Then they went to the churches and tried to lock them down too. They didn't want you to go to church. Over in Australia, you can't even talk. They didn't want you right now. They didn't want you talking to your neighbors. You can't even go outside. See, that's a overreach. We're talking about a virus that does kill people, but also many people have testaments that they survived it with comorbidity and all these things they talked about that you would die from having along with COVID. So,
I have an interesting story that I've read, and it happened to be during my time in the airport. Now, I haven't flown via airplane in over a year when COVID
oh wow,
first started, and so I took my first flight, and it was a short flight. Um, just about a month and a half ago. And I flew on Delta Airlines. Now, I know at one point Delta had like the every other seat rule. You
hmm,
had one person to a seat and then a space and then another person to a seat. Well, they didn't have that anymore. The flight was
right.
booked, it was
You need some
full.
change.
And I was traveling with my children as well. So they did ask us to keep our masks on at all times, with the exception of when you're eating and drinking. Now, the person that's asking for 3 Jacks and Cokes and more almonds and everything else, well, sir, you don't have your mask on for 75% of the flight because you're eating and drinking. But what was very interesting to me is that it's a published article right now that Delta Airlines is now going to start charging their employees that are unvaccinated $200 per month as a penalty. So
I heard that.
Wow.
some companies will charge you a surcharge if you're a smoker, and that goes with your health insurance and
Right.
whatnot. Delta Airlines is charging their employees $200 for each employee that's unvaccinated.
I've heard of them giving money for you to get vaccinated. I've never heard of you being penalized for not. See, that's a double standard. You see this, and it's a circle that we're going to see happen more than not. But to go back, I don't know if I answered your question to vaccines. I think in the mask, if anybody wants to get the vaccine, do it. That is your right, but it's also it should be your right not to have to take the vaccination. And that's what you want to do. Now, we talked about this being more than the flu. Now, I was blessed again to only have light symptoms. Okay, loss of taste and smell, and maybe had some nasalness going on, stuffiness at the most. But those are, to me, were signs of a flu. But again, I'm no health doctor. But if you need this vaccination, get it. If you don't need it, don't get it. Again, yes, there's traces of fetal matter in there, and it does go against the Christianity religion. We talk about aborted babies. We're against abortion. So why would we put something in our body that we preach against? It doesn't even make Catholics. They're against abortion, so they're going to be exempt from taking the shot as well. At the end of the day, it was a rush process. Even the FDA approving, which one was it? Was it Pfizer? Whichever one was just FDA approved. That still doesn't make sense because it takes about 10 years, they say, for any patent and for these things to go through the process. So we sped it up,
Exactly.
and it's usually tried on animals. That was well, the animals are us, I guess. But it's not safe to take yet. And we've seen people die. We've seen people who have stated, "Yeah, I had COVID, but I took the vaccination. I survived." That may be true. I'm sure that's happened on both
And then
sides.
they're reinfected. There's people that have had the
Yes, that
vaccine and
Yes.
they still wind up getting COVID anyway.
Yeah, we saw that with the Texans, House of Representatives, and they escaped from the House and all jumped in a chartered plane. Who was all vaccinated? They ended up catching COVID. Every last one of them, they caught COVID. So it's a mixed signal.
Exactly.
We just don't want mixed signals. We want everything to be right if we're going to put chemicals into our body, right? And I think I don't know what country it is. I just heard about it. One country found some metallic in it. They sent all the vaccines back. I think it was
Wow.
China, Japan.
Wow.
It was one of them. Yeah, they sent them back. They say, y'all take this back until you get it fixed. And they don't want their people taking it. So what does that tell you? If
Yeah.
they, as being an overpopulated country as well, they're saying, we don't want this. Y'all get it right and then bring it back to us.
Yeah. So they really don't know what's in the vaccinations, anyways.
We don't know.
Those
No, they
cells
don't.
were transferred to Philadelphia. I was doing my research and they were cultivated or multiplied throughout the years. But I'm saying, I don't know, how far they would last. But they say they're immortal cells. But I definitely had to go back and do my research of what Gloria stated in the comments because I always like to come back and give facts, and elaborate on it.
Right. Now, I will say too, Dominic, and you're right. We have to know the facts, so we're going to talk about it. That's good. If you don't know, you go back. I agree with that. But and some people can argue, well, the flu shot. We don't know all what's in the flu shot. I really don't. I know it's an influenza, right? But I don't know it all. They could have some aborted cells, and I pray not. But I think we look more into this one in particular because we were being forced. We've never been forced to take the flu shot. Matter of fact, some people and some doctors prefer you not to take it. They say, look, it's not exactly what everybody thinks. Some people say, well, we get sick from the flu shot. Even my doctor said that's not true. You don't actually get sick from the flu shot. It's in your mind. So it's a lot of different things, different health opinions. But at the end of the day, we don't know what's in other shots we've taken. But we have been digging deep because a lot of people, again, my sister was one of them. She was forced by her job. She works in the healthcare industry or field, as a social worker. And she wanted to bow out of the shot, right? And she was able to do it with the religious exemption. And again, if she would have had to just take the flu shot, she would have never looked into exactly what the flu shot had. But when you're trying to use ammunition, you have to do your research, like Dominique said, and we're figuring out it's probably not something we should be just thrown into our bodies,
Absolutely.
Exactly.
Absolutely. Well, Antoine, it has been such a pleasure speaking
Yeah,
with
Yeah.
you,
I've enjoyed
um,
it.
answering, getting you to answer questions that we've individually had, and a lot of that you were able to take care of just by your speaking. So
Yeah.
please let everyone know how they can listen to your podcast if they'd like to hear more information from you, if they'd like to hear more opinions from you. You have your podcast, so tell them where. I know you said all digital podcast streaming platforms, but go ahead and shout that out, as well as how they can find you on social media so we can continue the conversation. And I know I speak for myself and all the
Yeah.
ladies here. We would certainly love to continue chatting with you on another
Exactly.
episode of Real Chill Conversations.
I've enjoyed it. Y'all have been great hosts. I look forward to coming back. I don't know it all, but a little I know I shared, and I learned a whole lot from y'all too. But yeah, you can find me on a podcast, Spotify, and all the major podcast outlets, right? Breaker, all these ones. You can just research it. But also Blexit. I work for Blexit. So at the end of the day, you see me wearing this cool hat. People probably saying, what is he wearing? That is the black exit from the Democratic Party, who was started by Candace Owens and Brandon Tatum. You can look us up there too. BLEXIT. And that's free thinking. We offer free thinking with a special interest on the Black community. We focus on pro school choice. We on the Black community, right? Because there is a thing, such a thing out there like that, for you to be able to get vouchers and go to private schools like the rich people do. We look at prison reform. We talk about the Black history, and we just talk about the nuclear family, bringing the mom and dad back together. And so we enjoy it. So that's how you can find us, and that's how you can find me as well. Real talk.
And now that you mentioned Candace Owens, I just want to ask you, do you think at some point she will run for president?
Well, there's been some talk about that. I'm gonna be honest. She's moving the shakers. She just left the UK recently, which her husband's from the UK, but she's all over traveling across the country. And I think what she has going on right now is something that she needs to do. Her voice needs to continue to reach a lot of people. And I know, we're our community. We're very big on honor, right? And we're very big on attitudes and things like that. And if anything, we feel that you're saying negative that may sound like it's against the Black community, we're pissed off. So I know a lot of people got upset at her, but she's a strong voice and she tells it like it is. And she's young. She's younger than me, but she's very knowledgeable. And again, I believe God's called her to be that voice. It's not easy. Trust me. It's not easy for her. And I can tell you by being in the conservative movement, it's not easy. And you hit it on the nail, Dominique. You talk about being censored. That's a small portion of it. Imagine, I don't get them, but imagine getting death threats and things like that, all because you're trying to wake the Black community up and minorities up as well. And that's a tough deal. So you got to give her credit for that. And she's made money doing it, but it's not about the money. Her voice helps reach. And then, of course, that's a profession. So money travels with that. But she's a mover and a shaker, as I call it. And she's in high demand. And I support her and think she's a wonderful woman. And so that's where we're at. Yes, absolutely.
All right. Anybody else have any other questions for our special guest this evening?
Antoine, I just want to say thank you. Thank you for your service. Thank you for everything that you do in the community. And thank you for coming on our show.
Thank you very much.
No, I thank y'all. It was an honor to be. I know we've been playing a little tag trying to get it done. I worked today, but I said I was a little tired at first, but I told I said I had to get on the show and make sure that we spread the gospel. So thank y'all for letting me come on, and I've enjoyed it. Let's do it again. I would love to be here.
Yes, let's definitely do it again. We appreciate you. Again, as Edwina said, we thank you so much for your service. We thank you for what you're doing with the community. And let's keep the conversations going, because we always have questions. We're always finding topics to talk about in the news. Both Dominique and I, really all of us, but Dominique and I definitely really get into doing the research and really trying to understand what it is that's going on. So let's let the conversations continue. We'd love to have you back. Everybody, we thank you so much for tuning in to this special episode of our little news segment of Real Chill Conversations with Edwina, Brenna, and Dominique this evening. Natalie and T, we'll see y'all next time. Antoine, you have a great evening, sir. Great weekend, and you stay safe out there, okay?
I'll do it. Thank you, ladies. Y'all keep doing what you're doing. I love it. I love it.